I straightened, looking directly at Gregory. Your father died because of what you did to us. Did you know that? The doctor called it a heart attack, but it was a broken heart. Spencer died sitting in his study, staring at the empty safe where our life savings had been. Gregory paid further. I never meant. You didn't mean for him to die? Perhaps not. But you intended to steal from us. You intended to lie. You intended to use his name to secure a position for yourself in Seattle. I paused. Just as you intend to use James now. That's not fair, Brenda protested. We've faced difficulties as well. We lost everything due to poor investments. Our only goal now is to reconnect with our son, to reunite our family. Family? I asked softly, my voice barely audible. You talk about family? Family doesn't abandon a child under a bridge. Family doesn't build a life on lies that led to their own father's death. I reached into my pocket and took out a folded document, placing it on the table between us. This is a restraining order. It forbids both of you from contacting James or Sophie in any manner. It also prevents you from entering any property belonging to Havenwood. I pushed another document forward. This is proof of theft from our accounts. Although the statute of limitations has passed, if you challenge the restraining order, I will make sure this becomes highly public. Gregory looked at the papers, then at me. You can't do this. He's our son. I replied simply, No, he was your son. You relinquished that right when you left him under that bridge. I moved toward the door and opened it. 2 security guards waited outside. These gentlemen will escort you out. If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing. Brenda suddenly stood upright. You self-righteous fool. You think you can just steal our son, buy his loyalty with your money? I looked at her calmly. I didn't need to buy anything, Brenda. I simply offered him what you never did, truth and a choice. Gregory stayed seated, his expression suddenly old and defeated. Does he know about what I did to you and Dad? Yes, I replied. I told him everything, and he made his peace with it. And he still accepted the CEO position, knowing it was my father's company. He took it because it was his grandfather's company, I corrected. Spencer would have been proud of him. Gregory finally rose to his feet. And you, Mother, are you proud of what you've done? Turning my son against me? I didn't have to turn anyone against you, Gregory. You did that yourself. I swung the door wider. Goodbye. They stepped out, Brenton with her head held high in defiance, Gregory with his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched as the security guards escorted them to the elevators, observing until the doors closed and they disappeared from sight. Only then did I permit myself to sink into a chair, my composure finally beginning to break down. I don't know how long I remained there before a gentle knock sounded at the door. Alice James stood in the doorway, concern visible on his face. Margaret filled me in on what had happened. I straightened up, trying to regain my composure. I'm sorry. I should have let you handle it. It wasn't my place. He moved across the room and, to my surprise, took my hand. It is exactly your place, he said softly. You protected your family just as you've been doing since the bridge. I looked up at him, this man who had somehow become the center of my world. They'll try again. People like that always do, but we'll face it together. He offered a slight smile. Sophie's downstairs in the daycare. She made something for you in art class. Would you like to see it? I nodded abruptly, unable to speak past the constriction in my throat. The view from the CEO's office was breathtaking. To one side, the city sprawled out beneath us. On the other, the ocean extended to the horizon. The 3 of us stood on a private balcony, Sophie nestled between us, clutching both our hands. Higher, she requested, and on the count of 3, James and I lifted her effortlessly, swinging her between us. Her laughter, bright and fearless, was carried away by the gentle sea breeze. At age 5, and Sophie embodied curiosity and vitality, her dark curls bouncing as she hurried back inside to examine the model of the new Havenwood community being developed in Orlando. James observed her with a smile before turning to me. The board approved the Affordable Housing Initiative this morning, he said. Construction begins next month. I nodded, feeling pride swell within me. Spencer would have loved that project. I wish I'd known him, James muttered softly. You do know him, I replied. Every time you place a family in a home they can afford, every time you prioritize integrity over profit, I pause. He lives in you, James, and in her. We both turned our attention to Sophie, who was carefully rearranging the tiny trees around the model houses. Spencer's eyes held a gentle determination. After a moment, James spoke. "I've been thinking. The penthouse is too large for just me and Sophie, and your estate has many unused rooms." I looked at him, surprised. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" He shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips. "Sophie misses having breakfast with you, and that commute from Palm Beach is exhausting." I softly replied, "Havenwood was built for a family. It's been waiting a long time to be one again." Sophie quickly returned to us, her attention already caught by something new. "Grandma Alice, did you know there are fish in the fountain downstairs? Can we get fish for our pond?" "Our pond?" I caught James's eye over her head, noticing my own emotions mirrored there. "I believe that can be arranged," I told her, smoothing her wild curls. "In fact, I think your grandfather would insist on it." The sun was beginning to set, casting a long golden glow across the city. For 30 years, I had been a ghost within my own life, haunting the spaces Spencer once occupied, preserving what was instead of building what could be. Now, with Sophie's small hand in mine and James beside me, I was finally stepping back into the light. The cycle of pain Gregory had initiated had been broken. The legacy Spencer had built was secured, and I, Alice Sterling, was no longer a ghost in an empty mansion. I was home. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have forgiven a son like Gregory, or was I justified in cutting him off permanently? Please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories similar to mine. When Spencer moved to Florida in the 40s, he started building simple homes for veterans returning from the war. I turned the page to show a row of modest houses. These were the first Havenwood properties. Nothing fancy, but solid, built to last. James examined the photographs, his fingers just above the surface, barely touching. He seemed happy, the happiest when working with his hands. I turned another page. This was our first real office, a simple, converted storage room with only a telephone. Spencer would often say, "Havenwood doesn't build houses. We create the places where a family feels safe." James looked up. "Was that why you came to find us? Because of what you believed?" The directness of his question surprised me. "Partly," I admitted, "but the situation is more complicated than that." "My father," I continued, his voice slightly more strained, "what did he do to you?" I closed the album gently. "There are gaps in our family history, James. 30 years worth. Your father ensured that. We never knew about you as we were growing up. We never saw any of your childhood photos. That's something I can never retrieve." He remained quiet for a long moment. "You said we, me and my grandfather?" "Yes. Spencer never knew you existed. He died shortly after your father left." Something changed in his expression. "I'm sorry." "So am I." I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Your father made choices I don't understand. But Spencer, he was a good man. The best I've ever known. He would have moved heaven and earth just to know you." Later that night, as I was passing the nursery, I heard it. A soft, low humming. James was gently rocking Sophie, singing something tender and wordless. The melody clung to my chest like a physical ache. Spencer used to hum that same tune while working in his study, focusing on blueprints late into the night. I moved away quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Downstairs, I wandered through the silent house, my fingers brushing against the walls. For 30 years, Havenwood had been a museum to what I had lost. But tonight, for the first time, it felt like something else. Like a home. The morning in Florida was bright and warm, the kind of crystalline clarity you only find in October after the worst of summer's heat has passed. I sat across from James at the small breakfast table on the patio, watching him spread jam on a piece of toast for Sophie. She sat in a high chair, babbling happily. It was a stark contrast to the feverish, listless baby I first encountered beneath that bridge 6 months ago. 6 months. Sometimes it seemed like only days, other times like entire years. James had gained weight, his previously gaunt face now appearing healthy, with clear, bright eyes. He had established a routine here, morning walks with Sophie around the estate grounds, assisting Maria with household chores in the afternoons. He read voraciously from Spencer's library. While he was healing, I could already see the sparks of restlessness beginning to surface. A man like James needed a purpose. "Have you thought about what's next?" I asked, keeping my voice casual as I sipped my coffee. He looked up, his face guarded. I've been applying for jobs online, mostly factory work. There's a manufacturing plant about 20 meters from here that's hiring. I nodded thoughtfully, considering his words. That's certainly an option. Sophie gleefully crushed her toast, and James softly wiped her tiny fingers. The love and care he demonstrated towards her never diminished. It reminded me of Spencer, that same quiet, unwavering devotion. He said, "May I offer an observation?" I inquired. Certainly. Havenwood Properties has 100 agents capable of selling a 4-bedroom house. What we lack are enough people who truly understand what makes a house into a home. I placed my coffee cup on the table. You had your home torn away from you. You fought to create a home for your daughter under a bridge. You understand this better than any MBA I could bring in. His brow slightly furrowed. What are you implying? We have a vacancy for an assistant project manager. Entry level, with long hours. Not particularly glamorous work. I kept my gaze fixed on him. This isn't a gift, James. It's an opportunity. You would start at the bottom. No one would know who you are. Your success or failure would be entirely your own. He was silent for a prolonged moment, casually assisting Sophie with her sippy cup. I have no experience in real estate. Neither did Spencer when he first began constructing homes for veterans. I offered a slight smile, yet you possess a more valuable perspective. What would I tell people about how I landed the position? That you applied and underwent the interview process like everyone else, which you will do. I paused. No one at the company is aware of our connection. That is your story to share or keep private as you see fit. He gazed out over the gardens. Considering I don't want special treatment, you won't receive any. In fact, you will probably need to work twice as hard to prove yourself. I stood, gathering my napkin. Think about it. The role begins next Monday. If you're interested, I'll have HR arrange a formal interview tomorrow. I left him there with Sophie, knowing he needed space to make a decision. By dinner, he had given me his answer. 2 days later, he walked into Havenwood Properties headquarters for his interview. He was dressed in a suit I had never seen before. He must have bought it himself. It wasn't expensive, but it fit perfectly. He appeared quite sharp. James's first year at Havenwood was a trial by fire. I made sure he received no special treatment. Quite the opposite. His direct supervisor, Martin Reeves, was notoriously demanding. James spent his days immersed in zoning laws, environmental impact reports, and market analyses. On weekends, he worked open houses, setting up signs and brewing coffee for the senior agents. I observed from afar, never interfering. Every month, I received his performance reviews alongside those of all the junior staff. His reviews were consistently excellent, not because he was inherently talented at real estate, but because he approached each task with the same careful, methodical focus he had once applied to factory work. He was meticulous, dependable, and most importantly, he listened. By his second year, he had advanced into a junior sales role. One afternoon, I happened to be at the main office when he was meeting with a young couple, teachers with a newborn searching for their first home. I watched discreetly from the conference room next door. "How's your morning routine?" James was asking them, disregarding the listing sheets spread out on the table. "Who gets up with the baby? How long is your commute to school?" The couple exchanged surprised looks. "Well, Sarah usually rises first with Emma," the husband replied. "I handle the evening shift because Sarah needs to grade papers." James nodded, jotting down notes. "What's the most important room in your current apartment? Where do you spend most of your time?" "The kitchen table," Sarah responded immediately. "That's where I grade papers, where we eat, and where we play with Emma." James then asked about their ideal Sunday, observing how he was constructing a picture of their lives, not just their wish list. When they mentioned they loved to walk, he dismissed neighborhoods lacking sidewalks. When they discussed Sarah's mother's frequent visits, he concentrated on homes with guest rooms. By the end of the session, he had narrowed their choices to 3 houses, all within their budget, none featuring the granite countertops they initially thought they wanted, but each perfectly suited to their actual lifestyle. 2 weeks later, they finalized the purchase of a modest 3-bedroom house in a peaceful neighborhood known for its excellent schools. Their commission was less than what they would have earned if James had encouraged them to buy a more expensive property. But that December, they sent a holiday card featuring a photo of their family on the new front porch. James pinned it to his cubicle wall, and soon, word of his dedication spread. More clients began requesting the young agent who genuinely listened. His colleagues, initially dismissive of the reserved newcomer, started paying attention. By his third year, James had been promoted to senior project manager, overseeing the development of a new community in Jupiter. The Havenwood Shores project was ambitious. 50 homes were specifically designed to attract young families priced out of the luxury market, yet unwilling to compromise on quality of life. I attended the planning meetings, observing how James transitioned from the hesitant man I had encountered under that bridge. He commanded respect not through force of personality, but through competence and empathy. He insisted on integrating green spaces between the houses, ensuring sidewalks wide enough for strollers, and including a community center with childcare facilities. People aren't just buying houses, he explained to the development team. They're investing in the space between their front door and their neighbors. They're considering the walk to school. They value the view from their kitchen window while doing the dishes. His team listened attentively because he had earned their respect. They knew nothing of his connection to me, nothing of his past. All they saw was him as the project manager whose developments consistently sold out because he built communities where people genuinely wanted to live. Sophie was now 4 years old, a vibrant and inquisitive child who spent her days at Havenwood's corporate daycare center. James had relocated them to a modest house about 15 minutes from my estate, close enough for regular visits yet clearly signaling their desire for independence. I understood his need for separation, for building his own life. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable routine of Sunday dinners and occasional weeknight visits. I never brought up Gregory, and James never asked about him. The annual executive meeting was scheduled for the first Monday in October. The company had expanded considerably under my leadership, transforming from Spencer's small home building business into one of Florida's top real estate development firms. I had managed it alone for 30 years, longer than Spencer and I had run it together. I was weary. The boardroom that morning was filled to capacity, with every vice president, division head, and senior manager present, all anticipating the usual annual review. James sat midway down the long table, his portfolio laid open, pen in hand. At 31, he was among the youngest senior managers in the company's history, yet he had earned his position at this table. The room grew silent as I took my place at the head. I remained standing, taking in the scene. The faces all turned toward me with anticipation. These were talented individuals, skilled professionals, but only one of them truly understood what Spencer had created. It all began 30 years ago. My husband Spencer once stood in the same room and told our then small team that Havenwood wasn't in the business of merely building houses. Our real focus was on constructing futures. I paused briefly, allowing the significance of the words to sink in. Spencer didn't believe in simply putting up buildings. He believed in creating things that endure, foundations for families, legacies rooted in integrity. I slowly moved around the table, making eye contact with each person. For 3 decades, I have searched for a successor who shares that same vision. Not someone who merely knows how to read a balance sheet, but someone who recognizes the importance of a front door key in a family's hand. A quiet anticipation settled over the room. Several vice presidents straightened in their chairs, eyes filled with expectation. My gaze continued its sweep until it reached James. He watched me intently, his expression a mix of curiosity and humility. I have found that person, I continued. Someone who began at the bottom and demonstrated their worth through integrity and an empathy that cannot be learned. The room directed its attention to James, whose eyes widened slightly in surprise. Effective immediately, the new CEO of Havenwood Properties is James Sterling. The silence was complete. James looked at me, shock written all over his face. Then, gradually, the expressions around the table shifted, from surprise to calculation, and ultimately to acceptance. A few of the vice presidents nodded slowly. They had worked closely with James, seen his results, understood his leadership style. The appointment was unexpected, but not without explanation. James, I said, gesturing toward the head of the table, would you like to say a few words? He rose slowly, visibly gathering himself with effort. As he moved to take my place, he paused beside me. Why? He whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. I met his gaze steadily. Because you are Spencer's legacy, I replied softly. And mine. As James addressed the room, his initial hesitation gave way to quiet confidence. I sat down and watched as the future of Havenwood began to take shape. The company was destined to change under his leadership, evolve in ways Spencer and I could never have foreseen, but its core, Its understanding of what a home truly signifies would remain exactly as it should be. I was in my office at Havenwood Tower, reviewing quarterly reports, when Margaret buzzed through on the intercom. "Mrs. Sterling, there are two people in the lobby insisting on seeing Mr. Sterling. They don't have an appointment, but they're quite insistent." Something in her tone caught my attention. Did they give their names? A brief hesitation. A Mr. and Mrs. Gregory Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe properly. Mrs. Sterling. Should I have security escort them out? I gathered myself. No. Tell them Mr. Sterling is unavailable. I'll come down. Are you sure about that? I'm sure, Margaret. I stood smoothing my skirt with hands that suddenly felt unsteady. 30 years. 30 years since I last saw my son. I had imagined this moment countless times, what I would say, what I would do. Now that it was finally here, I felt strangely calm. The elevator ride to the lobby took 17 floors of memories. Gregory as a toddler running to Spencer with arms outstretched. Gregory at 12, proudly showing his father a model house he had built for a school project. Gregory at 20, his eyes cold as he explained why he deserved early access to his trust fund. I had seen the change in him, the growing sense of entitlement, the hollow charm, but Spencer had been blind to it. Spencer had loved unreservedly, without any protection. The doors swung open to reveal the shining marble lobby of Havenwood Tower, and there they were. I recognized Gregory instantly despite the years. His temples were streaked with gray, deep lines marked around his mouth, but he was unmistakably my son. The woman beside him had to be Brenda. Both were dressed in once expensive clothes, now showing signs of wear and tear. They stood near the reception desk, Gregory gesturing firmly at the security guard. "Don't think you understand who I am. I'm his father. I demand to see him immediately." "As I explained, sir, Mr. Sterling isn't available without an appointment," the guard replied calmly. "Then make an appointment. Tell him his parents are here." I moved across the lobby, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The sound drew their attention. Gregory turned, frustration evident on his face until he saw me. His expression froze. "Hello, Gregory," I said, my voice unusually steady. He paled several shades. "Mother." Brenda's eyes widened in recognition. "Alice," she said, her voice tense. Then she took a deep breath to steady herself. "It's been a long time. We've been trying to reach James." "I knew why you were here," I interrupted. I looked straight at Gregory. The news about James's appointment had been splashed across the business section of several newspapers. "You think there's money to be made?" "That's not fair," Gregory protested feebly. "We're his parents. We have a right." "A right?" I repeated the word as if it were glass in my mouth. "Let's talk about rights, shall we?" "Not here." I turned to the security guard. "Please escort these visitors to conference room B and inform Mr. Sterling's assistant that he is to be left undisturbed under any circumstances." "Yes, Mrs. Sterling." Gregory and Brenda exchanged glances but obediently followed the guard to the elevators. I took a different one, needing a few moments alone to gather myself. The conference room was small, furnished with a glass table and 6 chairs. I was the last to arrive, closing the door softly behind me. Gregory and Brenda had already taken seats on one side of the table. I stood silently. "You look well, Mother," Gregory started, his voice adopting that smooth tone I remembered all too well. "It's been too long. 30 years, 4 months, and 16 days, I responded. "Since the day you drained our accounts and vanished?" He managed a look of discomfort. "I know you must be angry." "Angry?" I interrupted him. "Anger is a luxury for the living." "I wasn't living, Gregory." Brenda broke in. "We made mistakes. We were young, but we're James's parents. We have a relationship to mend." I turned my gaze towards her. "A relationship?" My voice was dangerously gentle. "Tell me about this relationship. Was it the one where you refused to let your son and granddaughter stay with you when they had nowhere else to go? Or perhaps the one where you told James I was dead?" Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We had our reasons." "Do you know where I found your son?" I asked, leaning forward with both hands on the table. "Under a highway bridge in the rain, his child sick with fever. That's where your relationship left him." Brenda's face flushed. "We were experiencing financial difficulties." "You were experiencing financial difficulties," I repeated, each word precise and sharp, and your solution was to let your son and his baby live under a bridge. I discovered them gathered beneath a highway bridge in the relentless rain. The man was holding a feverish baby close to his chest, both drenched to the skin. This was no ordinary homeless man. This was my grandson. For 30 years, I had believed that my son's betrayal was the deepest pain I would ever endure. The drained bank accounts, my husband's heart attack upon uncovering the theft, the years of alienation, all of it seemed insignificant compared to this moment. I never thought I would find myself standing in mud under that concrete overpass, rain seeping through my costly coat, gazing into the eyes of my husband's stranger. "James Sterling?" I asked, my voice barely rising above the storm. He looked up, wary, defensive. "Who are you?" he questioned, instinctively shielding his baby daughter from this unfamiliar woman emerging out of nowhere. "My name is Alice Sterling," I responded, kneeling to meet his gaze. "I know your father told you I was dead, but I am your grandmother." The expression on his face in that instant told me everything was about to change. Before moving forward, please leave a comment sharing where you're watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We are building a community of remarkable people who understand that our most exciting moments can occur at any age. Now, back to the story. I kept the plastic folder on my desk for 3 days. It was black, unnoticeable, thin enough to slip between the pages of a book and vanish. My assistant had placed it there without saying a word, knowing better than to mention what it contained. For 3 mornings, I had my coffee at this desk, shuffled papers around, made phone calls, all while pretending the folder wasn't there. Today, I am done pretending. The Atlantic spreads out beyond my windows, a stunning blue canvas beneath the Florida sun. I designed this penthouse myself after Spencer passed away. It's all white marble, glass and steel, with sleek lines, nothing unnecessary, nothing to gather dust or memories. I have lived here for 28 years now. Sometimes I still feel like a visitor. I lift the folder. The report feels surprisingly light given its contents. $30,000 for a 6-page document and a single photograph. I suppose information doesn't weigh much these days. Inside, it's exactly what I anticipated. This is the final report from Decker Investigations. Decker himself is now retired. His son handled this case, but less thoroughly than his father, though discreetly. The Sterling name still manages to open doors even during my semi-retirement. The company now runs itself, more or less. I only step in when the board starts reminiscing about the old properties. Sentiment is the enemy of good business. The first page offers a summary. It mentions James Spencer Sterling, age 28, a factory worker who was laid off. He is currently homeless. His location is listed as Columbus, Ohio. Below that line, my eyes keep fixed. Parents Gregory and Brendan Sterling. Estranged. My coffee has gone cold. I push the cup aside. Of course, I knew he existed. I had hired the first investigator when Gregory vanished with our money. By that time, Brendan was already pregnant. I wanted to know where they had gone, what they had done with Spencer's retirement fund, the emergency accounts, and the bonds intended for our grandchildren's education. I found them living comfortably in Seattle, with Gregory working at an investment firm, leveraging Spencer's connections and our surname. I ended the investigation after Spencer's funeral, feeling it served little purpose anymore. However, 3 weeks ago, something awakened me at 2 a.m., that sudden, fully alert state you sometimes experience. Spencer used to say it was someone walking over your grave. I got up, brewed some tea, and sat in my kitchen, feeling as if I were waiting for something. By morning, I had called Decker's son and provided him with Gregory's name. I wasn't sure what I expected to discover after all these years. I certainly didn't expect this. The report is systematic, a detailed chronicle of a systematic collapse. James Sterling, born in Seattle, moved to Ohio at age 6, an average student with no criminal record. Married at the age of 22 to Olivia Whitman, he became a father to Sophie Marie Sterling, who was born 16 months ago. He had been working at Midwest Manufacturing for 5 years, but recently lost his job due to plant downsizing. And then the unraveling began. His wife left with another man. He missed several payments and was forced to vacate his apartment. His car was repossessed. He applied for shelter space but was placed on the wait list because of overcrowding. He made a phone call to his parents requesting temporary housing assistance, but the request was denied. I read that last line twice. Request denied. So cold, those 2 words, so familiar. Gregory turning away his own son for shelter, just as he had refused us any explanation when he cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. Some patterns never change. The final page of the report features a photograph, grainy and taken from a distance. It shows a man sitting hunched beneath the concrete ceiling of a highway overpass. Dark hair, thin frame. He is cradling something to his chest, a bundle wrapped in what appears to be a faded blue jacket. A small hand is visible, reaching up toward his face. I carefully set the picture down, as if it might shatter in my hands. I am back in our old house on Havenwood Drive, and 30 years disappear like smoke. The house feels eerily silent when I open the door. Spencer's car is parked in the garage, but he doesn't respond when I call out. I find him in his study, staring at the open safe embedded in the wall. It's empty. The antique desk where he kept his grandfather's pocket watch stands with its drawers hanging open. I recall how he didn't turn when I entered, how he simply kept gazing at the empty safe. Gregory took everything, he said. No questions asked. His voice was flat, like he was commenting on the weather. I phoned the bank, contacted our accountant, and repeatedly dialed Gregory's phone. There was no answer. When I looked back at Spencer, his complexion had changed, gray like aged paper, his left hand clutching his chest, his right hand reaching out to me. I couldn't reach the phone in time. The doctor called it a massive coronary, natural causes. Nothing anyone could have done. I knew better. Spencer Sterling died of a broken heart, seated in his favorite leather armchair, betrayed by the son who had once been the center of his universe. The memory begins to fade, pulling me back into the silence of my penthouse. The folder remains open and the photograph continues to gaze up at me. James and Sophie Sterling, Spencer's grandson and great-granddaughter. They are now living under a bridge because Gregory refused to give them shelter. For 3 decades, I have been a ghost in my own life. Managing Havenwood Properties was simply a way to pass the time after Spencer's death. Most things ceased to matter to me. I stopped inviting people over, stopped celebrating holidays. The women on my charity committees would whisper behind my back about how cold I was, calling me an ice queen. I never corrected them, but ice can preserve more than just cold. It can trap rage and maintain purpose. I gently close the folder with a soft thud. The decision feels like emerging from a long sleep. I press the intercom button on my desk phone. Margaret, I need the jet prepared and call Arthur at the car service. I'll require transportation in Columbus, Ohio. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. When will you be departing? I glance once more at the black folder. Tomorrow morning. And Margaret, pack my suitcase for at least a week, weather appropriate for Ohio at this time of year. Of course. Will anyone be accompanying you? No, this is personal. I end the call and walk over to the window. 65 floors below, people move like insects. So small from this height. It's so easy to forget that they have lives as complicated as my own. For decades, I've kept myself above it all, detached, safe, which ends tomorrow. I press my palm against the cool glass. I am 78 years old. I possess more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I own a company that bears my husband's family name. But what I don't have is much time left or anything resembling family. The man under that bridge doesn't know I exist. His father probably told him I was dead, just as he told me they had moved abroad. Another of Gregory's convenient falsehoods. James remains unaware of Spencer, Havenwood, or his own inheritance. He doesn't realize that his eyes, if they resemble the ones in his driver's license photo from the report, are a deep brown, just like my husband's. He doesn't know this now, but he will. I haven't prayed since Spencer's funeral. I haven't believed in much of anything. Yet, as I stand here gazing out at the vast ocean before me, I find myself hoping that some fragment of Spencer persists within that young man, that Gregory's venom hasn't permeated down to the next generation. Tomorrow, I will find out. Tomorrow, I will meet the last of the Starings, even if he doesn't realize that is what he is. The jet's engines thrummed at a pitch I had long since stopped noticing. 6 hours from West Palm to Columbus, 6 hours to question my own sanity. Outside my window, clouds stretched like a white carpet beneath us. I had left my untouched lunch tray on the side table, some artfully arranged salmon dish that Margaret had ordered. Food held no interest. I was running on black coffee and determination, both bitter and necessary. The cabin attendant appeared at my elbow. Mrs. Sterling will be landing in 20 minutes. Your car is confirmed and waiting. Thank you, Jessica. The weather in Columbus is not ideal. Heavy rain. Would you like me to arrange for anything additional? No, I packed appropriately. She nodded and retreated. I'd employed her for nearly a decade, and she still treated me with the cautious deference of a new hire. I suppose I've cultivated that response. Easier that way, fewer questions. The jet began its descent, banking through thick cloud cover. When we broke through, Ohio spread beneath us, flat, gray, and unremarkable. Nothing like the vivid blues and greens of Florida. This landscape matched my mood perfectly. Thomas was waiting as promised, standing beside a black Lincoln with an umbrella at the ready. He had driven me through 6 different cities over the years. He never asked questions, nor did he engage in unnecessary conversation. The ideal employee, Mrs. Sterling, he said with a slight nod as he held the door open. Thomas, good to see you again. Where to, ma'am? I handed him a folded piece of paper with the coordinates marked. He looked at it without changing his expression. Of course, it should take about 30 minutes. The car glided away from the private aviation terminal. As it merged onto the highway, Columbus resembled dozens of other mid-sized American cities I had visited on business. The chain restaurants, the car dealerships, the billboards promising relief from debt, illness, and despair all had a sameness that was almost reassuring in its predictability. Then we turned east, and the landscape began to shift. The first signs were subtle. More potholes appeared in the road. There were fewer new buildings, replaced by more prominent markers such as payday loan centers, liquor stores with barred windows, and vacant lots where once thriving businesses had stood. Rain began to fall, initially gentle, then intensifying into a steady downpour. The windshield wipers moved in a hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Slap, 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 slap. I had owned property in neighborhoods like this before. Early in my career, I would walk these streets myself, scouting for buildings to acquire. Spencer always claimed I had an eye for potential hidden beneath decay. But those were business trips, analytical evaluations of value. This time was different. Somewhere in this neglected place was my grandson. My grandson. The phrase still sounded unfamiliar in my mind. The car slowed as we approached a massive concrete overpass. The highway above roared with relentless traffic, the noise amplified by the heavy rain hammering on our roof. Through the street windows, I could see a small encampment tucked beside one of the support pillars. A blue tarp, some kind of tent, and piles of what might have been possessions or simply debris. Thomas pulled onto the muddy shoulder, the tires crunching in the wet earth, and the engine idled smoothly as he turned to face me. Ma'am, this doesn't look... He hesitated, carefully choosing his words. Safe. If you'll tell me what you need, I can go for you. No, Thomas. My voice came out sharper than I had intended. I softened my tone. This one is mine. His face showed no reaction. I'll keep the car running. I removed my umbrella from its sleeve and opened the door. The sound of the rain was deafening, a roar punctuated by the thunder of trucks passing overhead. The smell hit me immediately, wet earth, exhaust, and something else, the particular stolen essence of poverty. My shoes, Italian leather, sensible but expensive, immediately sank into the mud. I didn't allow myself to hesitate. I started walking toward the encampment, my umbrella a fragile shield against the pouring rain. Water splashed against my ankles with every step, penetrating through my pants despite my cautious strides. The ground beneath the bridge was a mosaic of puddles and debris, fast food wrappers, shards of broken glass, a tipped-over shopping cart, and there, pressed against the concrete pillar, a small tent with its thin fabric fluttering in the occasional gusts of wind that swept under the overpass. I was halfway there when I heard it, a faint cry barely audible above the storm. A baby's cry, not the vigorous wail of a tantrum, but a feeble, exhausted sound of genuine distress, of need. Despite the tricky terrain, my pace quickened. As I drew nearer, I noticed the tent flap was partly open. Inside, a man knelt with his back facing me. His shoulders were hunched, his spine visible through his thin t-shirt as he leaned over something in his arms. His movements were gentle yet frantic, the rhythmic rocking of someone trying to soothe the child. I paused just outside the entrance. For a moment I stood frozen, the full weight of what I was doing suddenly hitting me. I was no longer looking at a report. This wasn't a distant, abstract problem to solve. It was James Sterling. He spun around so quickly that it seemed almost painful. One arm instinctively wrapped more tightly around the bundle he was holding, while the other braced against the ground as if ready to run. His face, God, his face beneath the stubble and exhaustion, bore a striking resemblance to Spencer. The same strong jawline, the same deep-set eyes now clouded with weariness and defensiveness. Who are you? His voice was rough, either from disuse or illness. The baby in his arms squirmed, her cries growing louder and more urgent. She was wrapped in what looked like a man's jacket far too big for her tiny frame. Her face was flushed, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, despite the chill in the air. Without thinking, I stepped forward and adjusted my umbrella, angling it to fully cover the tent opening. Rain immediately started pelting my shoulders and head, but I barely noticed. "She's hot," I said, gesturing towards the child. "Fever?" A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "What do you want?" "We don't have anything. I'm not here to take anything from you." I crouched down, bringing myself to his eye level despite the mud soaking into my knees. "My name is Alice Sterling." He said nothing, with no recognition in his eyes. "I am your grandmother." He looked at me, confusion gradually giving way to suspicion. "That's impossible," he said coldly. "My grandparents are dead. Both sides. Your father told you that about me, at least." I kept my gaze fixed on him. Gregory lied. At the mention of his father's name, a change flickered in his expression. Not exactly softening, but a different kind of weariness. "I don't know what kind of scam this is, but I'm not interested." He began to turn away but paused as the baby emitted another cry, this one more urgent. "She needs a doctor," I said quietly. "You think I don't know that?" He snapped, his words raw with frustration and fear. "The ER said it's just a cold. They gave me some children's Tylenol and sent us home. She's been like this for 3 days." I studied him for a moment. "When did you last eat, James?" I asked. He looked away. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." "Maybe yesterday." His jaw tightened. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but I have a car waiting." I cut in. "It's warm, dry, there's food, and I can have a pediatrician meet us at my hotel within the hour." He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Right. And what do you want in return?" "Nothing you aren't willing to give." I leaned slightly forward. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to make a practical decision for your daughter's sake." The baby's cries subsided into whimpering. She looked utterly exhausted. "Sophie," he said softly, gazing down at her. "Her name is Sophie." "Sophie," I repeated. The name felt strange on my tongue, unfamiliar yet somehow correct. Spencer would have liked that name. "Who?" "Your grandfather, my husband." He examined my face, searching for something, perhaps a sign or a tell of deception. What he saw instead was probably exhaustion equal to his own. Finally, after about an hour, he said, "Well, go to your hotel. Sophie needs to see a doctor. Then we talk. If I don't like what I hear, we walk." I nodded once in agreement. He gathered a small backpack, his entire possessions in the world, I realized, and struggled to his feet while keeping Sophie secure against his chest. I noticed how he swayed slightly, steadying himself against the tent pole. "Do you need help?" I asked. "I can carry my own daughter," he replied, pride stiffening his spine. For a moment, we walked back to the car in silence, the rain still pounding around us. Thomas saw us approaching and quickly stepped outside to open the rear door. If he was surprised by my companions, he didn't display it. As James slid into the warm interior of the car, still holding Sophie close to his chest, I caught a glimpse of his face in the dim light. For a brief moment, the weariness vanished, replaced by pure relief. It was the expression of someone who had been drowning and finally reached solid ground. I followed him into the vehicle, closing my umbrella and allowing it to drip on the floor mat. At the Granville Hotel, Thomas and I called Dr. Winters. "Tell her it's urgent," I instructed. As the car edged away from the curb, I looked back at the small tent, already caving under the weight of the rain. By morning, it would be gone, washed away as if it had never existed, as if they'd never been there at all. Some ghosts refuse to be forgotten. I watched James from across the hotel suite while Dr. Winters examined Sophie. The transition from that moment under the bridge to this one had been rapid and confusing for him more than anyone else. Less than 3 hours earlier, they had been sheltering beneath the concrete overpass. Now, Sophie lay on crisp white sheets as a pediatrician listened to her chest. "Respiratory infection." Dr. Winters removed her stethoscope and confirmed the diagnosis. "She needs antibiotics immediately. I've brought some with me to start." She looked directly at James. "You got her help just in time, Mr. Sterling." Throughout the examination, James had not released Sophie's tiny hand. "Will she recover with proper care?" "Absolutely. She needs warmth, rest, medication, and good nutrition." Dr. Winters cast a glance in my direction. Mrs. Sterling says you'll be traveling to Florida tomorrow. James looked at me, uncertainty evident on his face. Only if Sophie is well enough, I replied, and only if that's what James decides. Dr. Winters nodded. A private flight would actually be better than a commercial one, less exposure to other illnesses. I will provide detailed instructions for care during the journey. After she left, James sat on the edge of the bed, with Sophie cradled against him. She had fallen into a calmer sleep after taking the medicine. The silence between us elongated, filled with unspoken questions. "There's food," I finally said, gesturing toward the room service cart I had ordered while the doctor was examining Sophie. "You should eat something." He looked at the covered dishes, then back at Sophie. I understood his reluctance to put her down even for a moment. "May I asked, holding out my arms. His hesitation was brief but noticeable. Then carefully he transferred his daughter into my arms. I settled into an armchair supporting her head in the crook of my elbow. "Eat," I said. "I've got her." He ate as if he hadn't seen food in days, which was probably true. I kept my eyes on Sophie, giving him the dignity of not watching him hunger. Her small weight in my arms felt both strange and familiar. It had been decades since I last held a baby. First Gregory, then some friends' children, and then no one. The thought of Gregory threatened to surface, but I pushed it down. "Not now." "Why are you doing this?" James finally asked in a quiet tone. "It's complicated," I responded, "and you need rest more than explanations tonight. Tomorrow on the plane we can discuss everything." He examined me carefully for a long moment. "I don't understand any of this. Why would my father lie about you being dead? Why would you come looking for us now?" Those are reasonable questions, but they have deep-rooted answers. I looked down at Sophie and then back at him. "James, I'm offering you and Sophie a safe place to stay at my home in Florida. Not forever, not with strings attached, just a place to recover and figure out your next move. If at any point you decide to leave, I'll arrange transportation wherever you wish to go. Just like that. No conditions. Just like that. Why should I trust you?" I looked directly into his eyes. "You probably shouldn't necessarily. You barely know me, but consider the practical reality. Your daughter is receiving the medical care she needs, and you have a safe place to sleep tonight. Tomorrow, you can make your next decision." He nodded slowly, finally succumbing to exhaustion after a long day. Within an hour, both he and Sophie were asleep, and I arranged our departure. As we rounded the final curve of the driveway, Havenwood Estate came into view through the car windows. The main house stood as it had for 70 years. White columns, broad verandas, windows that reflected the late afternoon sunlight. I watched James's face as he took it all in. His expression was a mixture of awe and apprehension. "This is where you live?" he asked, holding Sophie securely in his arms. "This is where Spencer and I lived," I corrected gently. "Your grandfather built this place the year before we married." The car stopped at the front entrance, and inside everything was ready. A nursery had been arranged next to the guest suite in the east wing. Maria, the nanny I had arranged, would be arriving within the hour. That evening, Dr. Leon, the local pediatrician, was scheduled to check on Sophie. James entered the foyer cautiously, moving as if he might accidentally break something just by being there. Sophie, still in recovery but showing signs of improvement thanks to the antibiotics, made a small sound against his shoulder. "Let me show you where you'll be staying," I said, guiding him through the house toward the east wing, intentionally avoiding the formal sitting areas. The guest suite I selected was cozy yet unpretentious. It consisted of a bedroom with an adjoining sitting area, painted in neutral tones, and windows that looked out onto the gardens. The connected nursery was simple but fully equipped: a crib, changing table, and rocking chair. "Maria will be here soon," I explained. "She's not here to take over. She's here so you can rest whenever you need to." James stood in the middle of the room, looking somewhat lost. "There are clothes in the dresser," I added. "Basic things, t-shirts, jeans. The kitchen downstairs is always open. Your rooms have locks." I pulled out a smartphone from my pocket, programmed with my number. "Feel free to call or text any time, day or night." He took the phone with his free hand. I was at a loss for words. "You don't need to say anything. Just settle in. Rest. That's all that matters right now." For 3 days, James mostly stayed in his rooms. Maria informed me that Sophie was improving rapidly thanks to the medication and proper care. I gave them space, understanding that James needed time to decompress and reassure himself that this wasn't some elaborate trap. On the fourth evening, I was sitting in the sunroom with tea and one of Spencer's old photo albums. When I sensed someone's presence, James appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "May I join you?" he asked. "Please." I gestured to the chair opposite mine. Sophie was asleep. Finally, Maria showed me how to operate the baby monitor. He looked at the device on the side table. "It's taking some getting used to," he said. "Having help?" I nodded, pouring him tea the way I'd noticed he liked it. No sugar, a splash of milk. "Did you get a chance to explore the grounds today?" "A little." I walked down to the pond. He accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "This place is incredible." "It wasn't always like this," I said, seeing an opening. I slid the photo album toward him. "Did you know your grandfather built houses with his own hands before he ever managed a company?" James looked surprised. "No, my father never talked about him, about either of you." I opened the album to a photograph of Spencer in work clothes, kneeling on a roof with a hammer in his hand. His smile was wide and genuine. Spencer grew up poor in Georgia. His father was a carpenter who taught him the trade.